Hello, BookTube, and welcome, despite appearances, to Comic Book Friday. I made 5 videos yesterday, and I've sort of reached the conclusion that maybe 5 videos is an organic upper limit for videos in one day. I have often said I could easily do 10 videos in a day. I love talking to you. I don't understand at all the booktubers to make 1 video a month or 2 videos a week or something like that. I understand people have real jobs and real responsibilities and even wear pants, but this doesn't take that much trouble. At least for me, it doesn't. I could easily do that, but it seems to me that that's a little bit freakish, don't you think, to do that many? So when I hit 5 videos yesterday, and I wasn't done with all the stuff that I wanted to talk about, I just figured I would let some of it wait. And one of those was I typically do a comic book video on Wednesday and on Friday. So I let the comic book video wait until today, and I thought I'd just launch into that now. I was going to give you a Comicsgate update. Those of you who maybe don't know what Comicsgate is or who haven't been following the news of Comicsgate, but I want to wait on that just a bit. I have some thoughts that are growing, but I want to wait on a couple of factors, see what happens, and then I'll give you an update then. Not that it's all that interesting. So in the meantime, what we're going to do today is just an ordinary comic book video. And what I like to do on Fridays, in addition to going through back issues, that's what I'm mainly doing, is going through all the back issues that I have of comic books, because normal comic book commerce for new issues is not really yet possible here in Massachusetts. Boston is still very raw from its memory of having spent all of 2020 so far as one of the United States' major hotspots for this virus. I have a feeling that is lessening a bit. I think that the numbers are going down, first of all, precipitously, very much along the same general outline as numbers would behave for just any other kind of normal viral outbreak, where it spikes and then it drops off as so-called herd immunity spreads, and also in this particular case as people relearn social habits, which I think most of the country has pretty much done. Most of the country has pretty much, it's been lodged in our consciousness, some new social habits, more aggressive hand washing, more aggressive awareness of what you're putting in your mouth and whether or not your hands are clean, and also in some cases, in some places, face masks. I'm not a big fan of that myself, but as long as necessary, social distancing, that sort of thing. So it's possible that comic book shops will go back to something like normal behavior in Boston, maybe this summer. I don't really know. But in the meantime, I'm looking longingly at all of you who have open comic shops. I don't have such a thing. Curbside pickup, I think, is now possible in some places in Boston, but it's a rigmarole, and I have, by the ripe old age of 28, I have reached a point in my life where I assiduously avoid rigmaroles. I don't like them at all. And as spoiled or pampered or first world as it may seem, curbside pickup is a rigmarole. You have to call the shop, you have to get somebody who knows what they're doing, because you're going to be asking for specific things. Those things have to be then processed and paid for, and then they have to be left out, and then you have to go, and if they're not out, or if they're the wrong thing, well, then what do you do? The short point in the long digression is that I'm not going to comic shops at the moment, so I don't have anything new to show you. But one of the things I'd like to do on Fridays, in addition to older issues, is whatever graphic novel or collection I happen to be working on. I have a great number of those, and I love them. Absolutely love them. I'm constantly in the process of shaping and reshaping, sort of fine-tuning my graphic novel and omnibus and collection, because it's the older stuff that I really like. And the one that I'm doing now, that I've been doing for days now, is one that you're already going to be able to guess. It's this Avengers Epic Collection, Behold the Vision, which I got online. I got this, I think I ordered this on eBay for comparatively little money, less than I would have paid even with an employee discount at Barnes & Noble. A reprint of Avengers issues from the 1970s. One thing I noticed about this copy, I don't know if it's eBay, I don't know if it's the condition that it was originally kept in by its owner, but that is happening very badly. And that has not done that. I have lots of other Epic collections. That's never happened with any of the others. But I love these issues. I was reading these issues and buying them religiously when they were coming out. It's John Buscema artwork. It's Roy Thomas writing. It's all really, really enjoyable, even though there are a lot of things in it that don't make any sense if you pay close attention. They don't make any sense. It doesn't really matter to me because the Avengers is Marvel's marquee super team. It's not their first family. That's the Fantastic Four, and it's not any of the other spin-off super teams like the X-Men or the Defenders or the Inhumans. But it is the marquee one. It's their Justice League. And I have always maintained, I've been reading the Avengers since the beginning, and I've always maintained through all these different eras that the team works best when there aren't any overpoweringly powerful characters on it. Like, for instance, right now in Marvel continuity, Captain Marvel, Carol Danvers, is allegedly the most powerful superhero who's ever existed. Her powers are not well defined at all. And they were once upon a time, and I can't spot the point when they changed. Once upon a time, when Captain Marvel, for instance, just 10 years ago was called Warbird, or before that when she was called Ms. Marvel, then her powers were well defined. She had limits. The character of Captain Marvel in comic books now does not have any limits. There's a great moment in an Avengers issue where a disgraced and broken Ms. Warbird, who's been drummed out of the ranks of the Avengers for alcoholism, learns that the Avengers are in a fight for their life on the moon, and says, well, I'll show them that I'm good enough to be on the team, and tries to fly to the moon under her own power and cannot do it. And there's nothing given in that issue that leads us to think that it was the alcohol that was the reason. It's just that she's a character who has limits. That's all. On the Avengers roster for these issues, there aren't any characters like that. I know you see Thor and Iron Man on the cover of this reprint here, but for most of the time, Thor and Iron Man are not in these issues. For most of the time, the lineup is Captain America, who in this string of issues under Roy Thomas's writing is an extremely athletic, normal human being with an indestructible shield. Then you have the Black Panther, another extremely athletic human being, this one with slightly enhanced physical senses, able to see in the dark, able to hear much better than normal, greater agility. Then you've got Hawkeye the Archer, who's just a normal man with very good aim with a bow and arrows. Then you have Hank Pym and his wife, Janet Van Dyne, who are able to shrink to insect size and become Ant-Man and the Wasp. And in these issues, Hank Pym takes on a different costume personality. Yellow Jacket. I think you can see him here. That is Yellow Jacket right there. Who usually retains his human size, but has vibrating wings on his shoulders that allow him to take enormous jumps, and when he shrinks he can fly. He has Yellow Jacket stingers that are basically energy weapons, low yield energy weapons that can stun or hurt people. And Janet Van Dyne becomes the Wasp, grows wings, has Wasp stings, that sort of thing. And then a little bit later on in this series, Hawkeye, the character of Hawkeye, decides to abandon his superhero identity as an archer with lots of gimmick arrows, and take the serum that Hank Pym used in order once upon a time to become Giant Man. Hawkeye takes that syrup and becomes a character. He calls himself Goliath. Takes on a different costume. So you have in one team both Ant-Man, you have Yellow Jacket, the Wasp, and Goliath all on the same team. And they are joined by, for instance, the Black Knight, a normal man with an enchanted sword and a winged horse, and a couple of other characters. And at one point, I mean, the marquee addition in these particular issues is the Vision. This guy, a superpowered android who can control his density, become light enough to fly, lighter than air, or as dense as a diamond and correspondingly strong. But there are a couple of others throughout here. There are a couple of issues here where the Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver, two longtime Avengers, rejoin the team just briefly. And the key thing about all of those characters, as opposed to, for instance, Iron Man or Thor, is that they aren't bludgeoningly powerful. They can't just run the fight on their own. Thor, especially, or in another example, an early example that we saw, Hercules, require a different calculus when it comes to stories like this. And I've always maintained, despite the fact that it feels a little disloyal because I'm a big Thor fan, I've always maintained that the Avengers are at their most interesting when they don't have that kind of power level on the team. So these issues are great. Just great. Where if you have a team composed of Hawkeye as Goliath, who can grow to 20 feet or 30 feet, and interestingly, where it's kind of hinted here at what his powers are. I mean, so he grows to 30 feet, and it's kind of hinted here that he not only gains strength in proportion to how much he grows, so that by the time he hits 20 feet, he's not just as strong as a 20-foot person would be, but super strong. But also that he gains density. We're specifically told in one of these issues that gunfire, for instance, ordinary bullets will bounce off his skin because it's become so thick. That's never really examined, but you've got him, you've got Yellowjacket and the Wasp, who have a very limited power set. You have Captain America, you have the Black Panther. And for most of the issues, that is the team, and that team can lose. It can be challenged. It has to think on its feet, and I like that. I like that quite a bit in these issues. So these were a joy to reread. There's artwork that isn't quite my thing. At one point, let me see if I can show you. At one point, Barry Windsor Smith, back when he was calling himself Barry Smith, joins the team and does very Kirby-esque, very intentionally Kirby-esque artwork. Not at all his normal style. And in another set of issues, Gene Colan draws them, but he's heavily cartoonish. He's heavily comic booky in a way that, again, isn't his natural state at all. And it's kind of funny. In one of the first issues that Gene Colan draws, Hawkeye reveals to his fellow Avengers that he has taken on the Goliath mantle from Hank Pym, who is Yellowjacket and who is talking to him. Hank Pym is a bioengineer, a biochemist, and yet even so, he says, his wife Janet says, "We hope your body adjusts to the growing serum better than Hank's did," because Hank Pym announces to the Avengers at the beginning of this collection that taking his growth serum and growing to Giant Man was not only hurting him physically, but mentally. It was causing him to lose his mind. And yet, when Hawkeye does the same thing, they say, "Oh, I hope you have better luck with it than we did." When you'd think the world's best biochemist would probably be able to determine, maybe run a few tests, see if Hawkeye was putting his life in danger by becoming Goliath. And that is the kind of inconsistency that I'm talking about here throughout these issues. Like, for instance, Ultron, who will be familiar to those of you who are not Avengers villains, because he was the big bad guy in the Avengers' second Marvel Cinematic Universe movie, voiced by James Spader. But at one point, we're getting the story of Ultron's origin in this issue, and we're told that his origin was that he was a robot that was created by Hank Pym, somehow gained sentience, we don't know how, and in its original confrontation with Hank Pym, it is winning and is bathing him in electronic light, and Hank Pym is crying out, "Is this to be the way I die after I've faced death 1,000 times?" And the original Ultron says, "No, I'm not going to kill you. What I'm going to do is brainwash you. I'm going to make you forget that this encounter ever happened." And you read something like that, and if you're a picky comic book fan such as I am, the first question you'll have is, okay, well, why haven't you done that before to any of the Avengers? Why don't you do that in combat with the Avengers? If you can make people forget things, how come you never do that again? And at one point, we get the origin story of the Vision, and Ultron is allegedly in these early issues his creator, who gives him the power to alter his density, to become as thin as a wraith or as tough as a diamond. And again, you're reading the issue and you're thinking, okay, well, why don't you have that power yourself? You can give that to the Vision. Why don't you have that ability yourself? But overall, these issues, they have social dimensions that they deal with. The Black Panther is very much not just a cardboard cutout character. He has a whole wealth of dimension to him. So does the Vision. This is the arc that introduced readers to the Vision in the gigantic Avengers omnibus volume that collects these issues that I also have. The Epic Collections don't reprint the original letters from these issues. The omnibus volumes do. So when you have the omnibus volume, you can track the reception of this new character. The Vision was a new character. He's introduced, he fights the Avengers briefly, then he turns on his creator and joins the team. In the issue, even an android can cry. And in those letters, you get to see how fans reacted, what their thoughts about the Vision were. That was fascinating. So that's the graphic novel that I have, the collection that I have been absorbed in for the last few days. But we also have individual issues. So let's go through some of these earlier issues. Okay, all right. This is a 5-issue run of the Avengers. This was written by Ralph Macchio and drawn mostly by Don Heck, I believe. The artwork's not good in any of these issues. Let me see who does the artwork. Rich Buckler does the artwork for most of these. Tom Palmer does the inking. Tom Palmer is a wizard as an inker, but there's only so much he can do. The artwork's just not good in these 5 issues. And the only reason that I have them is because they are fascinating. This is the issue run right here. And at the beginning of this issue run, the Avengers are at a low point in their membership. And the world is under crisis, and they need new members. It's actually an extra-sized issue that presents this dilemma. That is Captain America in a temporarily non-flag waving identity, and it's basically him and Thor at the beginning of this storyline. Most of the other Avengers are out of commission or not part of the team. They badly need members, and for this brief 6-issue run, the team is comprised of Captain America, who's just calling himself the Captain, Thor, then an Eternal named Gilgamesh, the Forgotten One is his name. He wears an idiotic, dorky costume, and he is an offshoot of a superpowered race that Jack Kirby invented that can do whatever superpower you need them to have. Plus, Mr. Fantastic and the Invisible Woman from the Fantastic Four, who are momentarily at odds and not part of their own team. And so they join the Avengers. Captain America extends them an invitation to be part of the Avengers, and they agree. They join the Avengers. And that is the reason why I've kept these. That's the reason why I find this whole run so interesting. In the very brief course, by the end of this 6 issues, Mr. Fantastic and the Invisible Woman leave the team again. And they're on the Avengers for so little time that they don't even bother to change their costumes. So their costumes are from another team. They just decide to be Avengers for a while, live in Avengers Mansion, use the Avengers laboratories. And I thought when I was reading these things, what an amazing opportunity that is for a writer who maybe wanted to do a little more with it than Ralph Macchio actually does. He gestures at it a bit, because of course the first thing that happens is exactly what you'd expect happens. Reed Richards has been leading his own super team for years in this continuity. He's not going to join the Avengers and suddenly ask Captain America's permission to do things, and he doesn't. He immediately starts just going off on his own, telling other people what to do, issuing combat directives in the field, and it rankles against Captain America. And I was thinking, I've always thought that if Ralph Macchio had been a little bit more interested in this, what incredible opportunities it would have had. What was Reed Richards like to live with in Avengers Mansion? Does he overhaul the technology of Stark Mansion? Does he overhaul the training rooms? Does he maybe put the Avengers to some sort of test to find out the limits of their abilities and whatnot? Or do he and Captain America actually ever have it out in terms of leadership? It never happens. It never happens. It comes close, but it never happens, unfortunately. But I still like revisiting the issues because it's great. It'd be great fodder for fan fiction. Okay, then we're going to go back to a late lamented event in 1993 in DC Comics. The DC Comics editors decided to kill Superman. They did it on a whim after too many beers to kill Superman. And in the vacuum that was left, 4 characters came forward to claim they were Superman. And one of those was, you see those are 3 of them right there. The Eradicator, Man of Steel, and Cyborg Superman. And there's one other, and the one other one is Superboy, who in this issue, this is great artwork by Tom Grummett. He claims that he is a clone of Superman. And it's not believable, even from the beginning. But of all of the Supermen, the Reign of the Superman storyline, he was the only one that was of any interest to me, mainly because of Tom Grummett's artwork. And Tom Grummett went on to draw him in his own comic book. He was the only one that had... Oh no, Steel had a spin-off as well. But I kept this issue. I once upon a time had the collection of the Reign of the Supermen, but I don't anymore. Most of the issues are just bad. But I kept it because I have an easily manipulable, long-term love of Superboy. Not this Superboy, but Superman when he was a boy. Clark Kent as a costume teenager in the American Midwest, where He solves crimes and stops bank robberies, and his best friend is his superpowered beagle. That is my favorite DC Comics world, and as luck would have it, my luck, that's not a DC Comics world that I can actually revisit. That no one actually revisits that, because that whole thing is locked in legal limbo. That is why DC Comics will not publish a comic book starring Superboy, who is Clark Kent. They have a Superboy, 2 of them in fact, but they won't do that. And that's why they won't reprint those issues either. A gigantic wealth of issues, the issues that formed me as a person. And those issues are not reprinted. They will never be reprinted until DC Comics makes some sort of peace with the Siegel and Schuster estates and the various hordes of lawyers and various levels of lawsuits that are involved to get those properties freed up. Very annoying. Very annoying. Oh, okay. All right. We've seen this already. This is Quasar. Which is a character that I don't really care about. I'm not really interested in it. But the reason that this run on Quasar interested me is because it's drawn by Greg Capullo in a really good way. The artwork is really, really good, and also the approach that he takes to this. Quasar is just a sort of a vaguely cosmic character. He has magic powers, a totally vague set of magic powers. But there's a subtext that Greg Capullo works into his drawing of Quasar. It's never touched on. It's never even vaguely hinted at in the comic itself. But the subtext is decidedly gay. This is his Quasar using his energy, and that's his friend Makari. They're going to be roommates, and they're setting up their apartment. And I'm saying in the 90s when this comic came out, no other superhero looked like this or looked at his friends like that. And this whole issue is about an extraterrestrial female artificial android creature trying to find a mate and impregnate him. So it's as heterosexual as it gets for Marvel Comics. But even so, the sensibility of Quasar struck a note with me that I'd never seen before in a comic book. It wasn't true in any other Marvel comic book at the time, and that isn't the reason that I collected these issues, and the reason that I kept them is because the artwork is fantastic. Just in general, wouldn't matter to me one way or another. But I thought that was fascinating, and I wonder what future comic book historians will make of it if they look back on this time. Probably nothing. Probably I'm imagining things. Okay, then we go back to 1974. Good Lord. The writer is Jerry Conway. This is John Buscema artwork, but he is so heavily inked by Chick Stone that it looks like Sal Buscema artwork with a Gil Kane cover. This is Fantastic Four giant size number 2, where the Fantastic Four go back to the 1920s. This is an example of a bad Gil Kane cover. Unfortunately, Gil Kane's never any good really at drawing the Thing, because Gil Kane is all about sinuous lines, body lines, that sort of thing, and the Thing is not. The Thing is a rock creature. But here, the source of the peril is deep in the background of the book, and you have to search for it. And the Watcher is this big red head on the back of the cover. It's a bad cover. It's poorly designed. But the issue was fairly good. The issue is just our time traveling heroes, just to a number of different places and times and whatnot, and is about as interesting as you can do. And the Fantastic Four go back to the 1920s. Okay, all right, then we're going to go back even further, I bet. Yeah, 1967. This is Stan Lee and Gene Colan, the aforementioned Gene Colan. This is Daredevil, number 29, where Gene Colan is still very much in cartoony mode, heavily inked here instead of with a nice surreal wash of inks. The issue is one in which Matt Murdock pretends to be Daredevil as a way of throwing people off the scent. When you couldn't, of course, wear dark glasses under a skin-tight mask, and even if you could, nobody in the book seems to notice that Matt Murdock has muscles coming out his ears. It's this ridiculous thing, but I am a big fan of Gene Colan's artwork. I have a lot of these Daredevil issues that he drew, even though I'm not a fan of Daredevil, because he has no superpowers. He's not from Krypton. But, oh, all right. Well, you never need, in my comic book collection, you never need to go very far to find somebody who is from Krypton. This is Superman, The Adventures of Superman number 600, with all sorts of anniversary style stuff. So there are big storylines, there are pin-ups and whatnot all throughout here, big guest appearances, guest artists, guest pin-ups, all that sort of stuff. I'm always a sucker for big anniversary type issues like that anyway, especially if it stars Superman. Okay, then we go back to, this is from the 70s, yeah, 1974. Jerry Conway again, the writer. The artist here is Rich Buckler again, but unlike with that later run of the Avengers, here Rich Buckler is at his peak of power, although he was an homage artist. So in this case, he's doing an homage to Jack Kirby. He doesn't have a style of his own. He's just doing Jack Kirby in this issue. This is Fantastic Four number 148, heading towards their 150th issue, which we've already seen, because these are not in any order. My comic books are not in any order. That is terrible. Okay, great. All right, now we're going to go back to the 70s. Yes. Yes, 1975. This is Giant. For a while, DC Comics did their comics as 100-page giants. They charged you 60 cents. It was a lot of money at the time, but you get a lot of stuff. You got an original story or two at the beginning, and then a bunch of great reprints. And Tarzan did that for a while. This is the Joe Kubert Tarzan. So you've got this is an original cover by Joe Kubert. And you've got a lot of reprints of all sorts of jungle-related figures, including some great old stuff drawn by Russ Manning. And then you have the original story at the beginning, with great Joe Kubert artwork, just fantastic. So I don't have all the Tarzan Giant issues. I wish I did. The Giant issues just in general. I remember getting them on the newsstands and thinking, boy oh boy, they aren't going to do this forever. This isn't the future of comics. So there's going to be a limit to these things, which means this is collectible. But then, as now, 60 years ago as today, I didn't really care about collectibles, so I didn't bother. But I have some. I have quite a few. I just wish I had more. Okay, here's another anniversary type thing. This is another anniversary type thing. This is Amazing Spider-Man 500th issue. The number on the issue is 500, and this is John Romita Jr. artwork all throughout. Incredible John Romita Jr. artwork throughout until the end. The very end of this issue is the last 5 pages are drawn by John Romita Sr., John Romita Jr.'s father, and the person who originated the visual look of the Spider-Man that people think of today. And it's fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. As far as I know, this is the last time John Romita Sr. ever drew Spider-Man on a paneled comic book page. And the magic of the Norse god Loki gives Peter Parker the ability to talk with his beloved Uncle Ben just once, just for a few minutes. And it's fantastic. I mean, I love John Romita Jr.'s artwork all throughout here, but that's the reason that I kept this issue. Okay, all right, then we go back to the 1990s, yes? Yes, this is 1991 with a Jerry Ordway cover, just a classic Superman Jerry Ordway cover, Truth, Justice, and the American Way. Look at that. Just a classic call-out to the opening of The Adventures of Superman, where we're told that he stands for truth, justice, and the American way. This issue takes place immediately after the boring, lackluster issue in which Clark Kent tells Lois Lane that he is Superman. It's not a dramatic reveal. He just tells her, and then that's that. And then they have a couple of conversations about it. A massive mishandling by DC Comics. That is not what should follow from Clark Kent telling Lois Lane that he is Superman after 50 years. But it wasn't the only Superman massive mishandling in the 90s, so I was used to it by that point. Okay, then we have a two-parter. Great. This is Superman and Action Comics, in which John Byrne is the writer here, I believe. Yes. Yeah, John Byrne is the writer, and he was given Superman after Crisis on Infinite Earths. Crisis on Infinite Earths smoothed out what DC Comics considered the overcomplicated back nature of its continuity. It wasn't. Comic book fans can handle it, but they smoothed it out anyway. And one of the big effects of that was that they handed then Superman to John Byrne, who was by then a very famous fan favorite author and writer, and they said, you can revamp this character. You're going to make Superman. And John Byrne took it halfway seriously, the way he does everything. One of his original proposals was that Superman and his mother come to Earth, that there's room in that rocket ship for 2 people. DC Comics nixed that idea. John Byrne's other idea was that Superman be much less powerful. Still very powerful, but not able to juggle planets or whatnot. And one of the other things that John Byrne did for his Superman run was to say that Clark Kent puts on the Superman costume as an adult in Metropolis, that he was not Superboy in Smallville, never wore the costume as a teenager. And that caused the Legion of Superhero fans, such as myself, to say, well, we've been reading the Legion of Superheroes for 40 years, where their inspiration is Superboy from Smallville. And now there was no inspiration, so what's going to happen to the Legion? And the Legion was revamped. When it relaunched, it was revamped. So various numbers of writers came up with various ways around that. There was no Superboy, so we'll have to come up with other characters, some other character to inspire the Legion. And then, as if that weren't bad enough for John Byrne, he then decided, just out of boredom, when he was writing Superman in Action Comics, to bring back Superboy. There was no controlling him. So we get a Superboy who returns here, and of course, he is the original Superboy. So from a DC Comics continuity in which Superman had godlike powers. So this Superboy is easily more powerful than Superman in the new continuity, and Superboy brings back the Legion. The Legion of Superheroes comes as well. It's sprawled between these 2 issues. I got them, of course, because I was eager for any appearance by the real Superboy, by the real Legion. It didn't go anywhere, but nevertheless. But we're out of time, aren't we? Yes, we are. We're out of time. We have a lot more to do. All right, so I'm going to wrap this up. I'm going to wrap this up at Superboy and the Legion, and we will just go on from there on Wednesday, because I don't want these comic videos to get too incredibly long. So I'll wrap this up, but I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.